That calculation for Ukraine is similar. America, at this point, has to decide whether it's, willing to take the L and hold the L. And I think Trump is trying to do the most Trumpian thing, which is to say, I'm washing my hands of this. This is not my thing. This is Ukraine. Ukraine has sovereignty. All right, dude. Mass hysteria excuses them of their crimes, not mass hysteria. Is deliberate fascist and colonial tactics. I mean, I think the outcome of that, if people do believe, don't excuse them by pathologizing. They're mostly aware and don't care. No, I don't think that people are saying that cynically. I think it's both. And the function of it is the same nonetheless, whether they sincerely believe this insane shit or not. But ultimately, you don't turn around and say, like, the Nazi anti-Semitism hysteria gave them good reason to do the Holocaust. You don't. You just say some were hysteric, some were deliberate, some were aware that it was bullshit, but the end results are still all the same. You have to analyze the fears that people have with the actual things that are happening. You have to match them against, like, the severity.
President Volodymyr Zelensky say they will meet Monday at the White House. The news coming hours after Trump's high-profile Alaska summit with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, which ended without a deal or an agreement to end the Kremlin's 3-year war on Ukraine. It was Putin's first time back on U.S. soil in more than a decade. He received a grand welcome, complete with a military flyover and a red carpet rollout. After their 3-hour...
Yeah, he's going to bring Zelensky over to be like, It's time for you to apologize to Vladimir Putin.
Sit down, Putin said he and Trump had reached an understanding. President Trump returned to Washington, D.C. early this morning, speaking with Zelensky and other European leaders on the flight home. Nancy Cordes begins our coverage in Anchorage, Alaska. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning, Dana. Yeah, and President Trump used that 7-hour flight back to Washington, D.C. to hit the phones. He spoke to Zelensky. He spoke to NATO leaders to brief them on what he had discussed with Putin. And in that Truth Social post this morning, he said that he is meeting with Zelensky on Monday and that if that conversation goes well, he will then set up a meeting for all three leaders. But if Putin made any concrete steps towards peace in this summit, President Trump did not reveal them, either here in Alaska or on his way home.
President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin both left Alaska Friday, hours ahead of schedule, after a 12-minute public appearance in which they did not take questions.
There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there.
President Trump didn't elaborate, leaving many to wonder whether the two leaders made any true progress towards a ceasefire in Ukraine.
Now it's really up to President Zelensky to get it done.
In an interview before heading home, Trump seemed to suggest it was now Ukraine's responsibility.
I think the meeting was a 10 in the sense that we got along great, and it's good when...
Yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 because the sex was incredible. Okay, I know it seems unique and potentially the first very real indication that American dominance around the globe is no longer what it was post-Cold War. Okay, but while many naysayers will say, oh, you brought Vladimir Putin here and you extracted zero concessions out of him and seemingly got nothing in return, with the exception of like him saying this war would have never started if Trump was still president. But the sex was awesome. It was good.
You know, two big powers get along, especially when they're nuclear powers.
The two men did get along, especially at the start of the summit, when President Trump greeted Putin on the tarmac like an old friend and even invited him to run.
I'm telling you right now, liberals might get mad at me for saying this, but my approach to this subject is actually a little different. My analysis of the events and what it spells, what it means, is different than Trump loving Vladimir Putin or whatever. Obviously that much is real, but I don't know how much Trump could do in this situation. And I don't even know if Joe Biden could have done anything different in this situation either at this stage. Like, I look at the events that unfolded as, I don't give a fuck if people yell at me for saying this. I think America was like, we're the United States of America. We can give unlimited weapons to Ukraine, and we can just like keep this managed conflict that withers away Russian the Russian military without losing a single active duty service member in that time frame, and that $50 billion plus budget hold that we have after withdrawing out of Afghanistan can directly go to Ukraine instead. And it's a much better version to engage in like this kind of proxy war. And I think like, especially after the first big push, the success of the Ukrainian defenses, when Putin went all the way into Kyiv, caused the Western military industrial complex backed politicians to assume, oh, this is great. Like, we can just like get, we can actually continue a war of attrition. And they did not suspect that Russia would be able to harden their position deep into eastern Ukrainian territory and basically take over 20% of Ukrainian land and even make more territorial gains as recently as this past week. And I think America thought Ukraine could like at least be in a constant state of defensive posture without losing this many combatants, without losing this many people on the defensive side, and that they could just like keep slow rolling arms shipments into Ukraine. And therefore, at this stage, it's like there's not really much America can do, especially as like defending Ukraine predictably, as I said over and over again, was inevitably going to be unpopular because Americans are very selfish anyway. And in spite of all the media pushes initially, people eventually lost interest, add Israel into the equation, and now our already limited runway is now going to Israel so that Israel can do its genocide. And here we are. That's it. Like, I think I don't necessarily think that like Donald Trump is going to be able to do anything different than whatever the battle lines have created as a reality. Mearsheimer told Ryan Grim that the summit happens so Trump can avoid imposing secondary sanctions on India as he promised. That also kind of makes sense. To make it seem as though like Russia is actually invested in the ceasefire. Is that what you mean? Originally, the proxy war scenario was to make Ukraine into 80s Afghanistan situation for the Russian army. Then it morphed into making Ukraine a South Korea type frozen situation. America failed in both. Yes, I see that. So at this point, it feels like there's no, like, Trump told Zelensky he doesn't hold the cards, right? And that part is true. We all know that that's true. But you know who also doesn't hold the cards? Donald Trump. That's it. It turns out America also doesn't hold the cards because guess what? Putin invaded Ukraine, fought against all of the Western weapons that were sent into the country in the hands of the Ukrainians, and was able to successfully push 20% into Ukrainian territory. 20% of Ukrainian territory is now annexed by Russia. Their positions have hardened. They're pushing even further. And it's just going to, I guess, end when Russia chooses to end it. Like, what more could you do? You hit the mother of all sanctions. I guess, like I said, the only thing you could do is sanction secondary markets, which would cook the energy markets for Europe. And also push away an important ally against China, which is India. But ultimately, I don't know what any president could do in this situation. This is not even a defense of Trump. I don't know what any American president could do in this situation right now. I mean, I don't think it's even Trump trying to get like a Nobel Peace Prize here. If Trump really, really, really wanted a Nobel Peace Prize, he'd just get Israel to stop. It's that simple. And he would deserve the Nobel Peace Prize if he did that over Biden, for sure. But he's not. He's not doing that. So it's not going to happen. Fuck him. I mean, they might still give him one because the institution is morally bankrupt, is fraudulent. But I just assume when I see the situation in Ukraine, I look at it and I'm like, I don't even know what more America could do at this point. I guess they could just like keep giving weapons to Ukraine, but Ukrainians don't want to fight. What are you going to do? I guess arming the Ukrainians that do want to continue fighting is one thing. American Sharma's take was pushing India towards Russia and China would not be ideal, and that's why he met with Vladimir so he can get himself out of the sanction passing. He immediately said after the meeting that sanctioning India, that ship has already sailed. Now, either Ukraine pulls a Vietnam or the East is forever gone. No, there is no Ukraine pulling a Vietnam, dude. What are you talking about? Ukraine already had a reverse Vietnam situation. Like, Vietnam was armed and trained and had a standing military and anti-aircraft weapons outside of the popular forces like the Viet Cong. Okay? They had that and they succeeded. The terrain was different. It was a different set of circumstances. You know, they had a jungle, they had a decent understanding of they had a much better understanding of the region. They had a logistical supply chain that they could use to dupe American forces. It's already too late. Giving news to Ukraine means we materially culpable for a weapon. Should they use it to Russia to attack and they respond with one? Is Jover like Jover? I don't know, but I don't think America's going to be able to give Ukraine a weapon. That is crazy. Y'all are insane. Ukraine is halfway into this mess because America took away its weapon, its nuclear weapon. What if we give Ukraine only one single nuke? Okay. Trump's admiration for Putin is about his love of tough guys and ideological alignment around nationalism, but I'm coming to the realization it's also because Russia is just very big. Trump is a pre-kindergartner and sees lots of land on the map and believes this confers status. His mention of Russian landmass before, quite a few times actually, I think he views this as evidence of a cool and good country. I could see that. Trump is telling Zelensky to take a deal of giving over all of Donetsk in exchange for Russia freezing most of the front lines. Yeah, see, but like all of that is insane. There's no, for all intents and purposes, this is an infinitely worse situation that is going to seemingly continue no matter what happens. That's why overwhelming majorities of Ukrainians want a ceasefire negotiation, and also majority of Ukrainians believe it won't happen. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Saturday that Ukraine should make a deal to end the war with Russia because Russia is a very big power and they're not, after a summit where Vladimir Putin was reported to have demanded more Ukrainian land. I think one of the funniest outcomes of this also is that this does unironically show the rest of the world that America is no longer the big dog in town. Like Russia, a much smaller economy in comparison, has been able to successfully undermine American interest in Ukraine. That's it. This is the, like I've talked about multipolarity existing around the planet. Okay. I've talked about multipolarity is imminent, but this is it. I'm seeing it. Like I'm seeing it with my own two eyes. I think this is it's over. America is no longer the hegemonic superpower. Obviously, when America says like, oh, we're the world police or whatever, it's bullshit. But this is what it looks like when America is no longer the world police. Like this is straightforwardly what it is. And the problem here is that America doesn't realize that it's no longer the world police and is still coping and behaving like it still is the world police, which will inevitably lead to more violence. Like, I really, really, really hope that we don't try to pull some shit like this with China. Oh my Lord. I hear what you're saying, but this may be short-sighted. Putin has been doing this in the U.S. for decades at this point. No, never to this degree. Not even close. That's crazy. You can't use Georgia as an example. Doesn't come near what is going on right now. And you certainly can't use Crimea as an example. Once again, doesn't come near what has taken place. There's never been something like this. This harkens back to like Cold War era defeats. And even then, obviously America won the Cold War. Socialism, communism, all of that was lost in the process. The USSR dissolved. Especially in the post-Cold War era where America was a singular power, the singular force on the planet. This has never been, nothing of this sort has ever taken place, in my opinion. Do note this is less about your own decline and more about our rise. If China disappeared tomorrow, you'd still be the premier world superpower, even with Trump. Yeah, of course. But that's precisely why I always advocate to engage in deal making with China and a peaceful transition into a multipolar world that could create more peace around and more stability around the world, as a matter of fact. But if America postures in a militant fashion, not recognizing that it is no longer the single hegemonic power and was able to get owned by Putin, okay, owned by Russia, owned by Putin. I don't know. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe I'm reading this differently, but like demanding that the European allies spend 5% of their GDP on NATO weapons or whatever is not going to cut it. Is not going to fix the situation at all. I think it's cooked. Hey, Hasan, how serious are those American troops coming to Latin America? Should I get worried? I mean, yeah. Knowing the neocon hawks, this is unacceptable. I think Bolton types who are willing to relinquish NATO if it means a new Russian-Indian-American alliance, anti-democracy, pro-feudalist, monarchist, anti-Sino policy, you're out of your mind if you think neocons will ever give up NATO. Why would the neocons give up NATO? The neocons are never going to give up NATO. NATO is an incredibly important asset to American dominance. You're just basically dismantling the last remaining thing you have at your disposal to continue LARPing as though you're the world police. It's just not going to happen. Complete insanity. Mr. Trump told European leaders that he believed a rapid peace deal could be negotiated if Mr. Zelensky agreed to give up the rest of the Donbass region to Russia, even those areas not occupied by Russian troops. This is literally just the Putin plan. Okay? And it kind of feels like he's going to take it, either by way of further military incursion or through the fake ceasefire process. Scoop. Putin demanded Ukraine withdraw from eastern Donetsk region as a first step towards ending the war. Three sources familiar with the matter told us. Trump relayed this to Zelensky and the European leaders in their call on Saturday. It's over. This is the L. Putin came to America and said, hold this L to America. Just as I've said, the calculation for Article 5 being implemented for a country like Poland is not about like defending Polish people, but instead is about defending American hegemony. That calculation for Ukraine is similar. America, at this point, has to decide whether it's, willing to take the L and hold the L. And I think Trump is trying to do the most Trumpian thing, which is to say, I'm washing my hands of this. This is not my thing. This is Ukraine. Ukraine has sovereignty. After spending the first 8 months being like, you don't hold the cards, I hold the cards, little bro. Now he's like, Ukraine has all the cards. If they want to give up territory, then it's their prerogative. That's their, they get to do that. Guys, come on. Slava Ukraini. What do you mean? They're a sovereign nation. It's Biden's war. It's Ukraine's war. Got to talk to the EU real quick. That's a L that America Trump is seemingly trying to shed from himself, even though he seemingly is going to hold that L. Trump relayed this to Zelensky and the European leaders on their call on Saturday. It's pretty funny because it's like a bully that gets beaten up at home, What does the bully do when he goes to the playground? He just like bullies people more. He bullies the children more, the smaller children more. That's what Trump is doing here. All of this like posturing against Ukraine and the EU is just a way to reinforce that America is still the world power. I promise. I swear. It's still the world power. We still got the sauce. Please look. Yaroslav Trofimov, Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Vladimir, stop the killing. Niet. I want a ceasefire. Niet. Ceasefire in 2 weeks or I impose sanctions. Let's meet. Okay, no sanctions until the meeting. Putin, Alaska, niet, no ceasefire. I still have the same demands as in 2022. Oh, well, let's forget about a ceasefire or sanctions. It was a great and very successful day. I mean, I hate to agree with the libs here, but like that low-key is what happened. Okay? That is what happened. Putin is not just winning territorial acquisition here. Okay? This is a bigger situation than that. And I think the more reluctant America is of recognizing how much the power that it has on the global stage is like completely gone away, and then acts accordingly and less violently, the easier this transition will go. And I do not think that America is going to act in a nonviolent way. No, not it's a lib It's agreeing with the right thing. The left has been shouting from the rooftops about the Chapo has been talking about it for months. What do you mean? There literally can be no end to this war without LPR and DPR being resolved after nearly 15 years of civil war. This is what it's always been. I do not think that this was ever, and I'm being super sincere with you, I don't think this was about liberating LPR and DPR. That was just the seasoning for it. Okay. If you're saying talking about how this ends, yes. LPR and DPR being completely annexed as territories into Russia would be a big victory for Russia, and it would be enough to stop the bloodshed. Hopefully. And while this was a non-starter, I would say even a couple months ago, as a maximalist demand that Putin was making, right now, it seems like it's going to be the only game in town. Why? Because there's no other alternative. It's either, tomorrow through ceasefire or a couple months from now, maybe not in the winter. I don't know. Yeah, the DNR, LNR don't even exist anymore. Legally, they're oblast of the Russian Federation. And before people say appeasement, you're doing appeasement. This is Neville Chamberlain. You are Neville Chamberlain. Remember, 2022, appeasement looks amazing as opposed to now, don't you think? Battle lines would have looked dramatically different if they were paused at that point. I'd rather die in a nuclear fire than appease Russia. Okay, I wouldn't. That's crazy. This would be significant. President Trump told European leaders that he was open to offering U.S. security guarantees to Ukraine, according to several European officials. What does that even mean? Trump tells Europeans he is open to U.S. security guarantees in Ukraine. The peace deal would have looked a lot more favorable if Ukraine hadn't listened to Boris Johnson. I know people are going to get real mad if you say that. They're going to turn around and act like, there wasn't a real deal then, and it was actually Zelensky's own L to want to continue the war at that point. And it wasn't actually Boris Johnson that convinced him. It's, the guarantee is that U.S. won't provide security. So, we're going to do a security guarantee in Ukraine, as in we're going to invade Ukraine ourselves, actually. We're doing a collaborative project with the Russians. CNN was reporting NATO-like security guarantees. What does that mean? Putin proposed China as a security guarantor. According to Axios, oh, interesting. Who thought that would be the only pathway towards a just and even-handed and just managed negotiation, a real ceasefire, long-term ceasefire? Now, this doesn't mean China's going to do it, chatters. I'm just saying that the pathway to a real ceasefire comes from bringing China into the table. Okay? Making China the table. Well, Turkey is the table, but yeah, Zelensky takes aim at China. Brazil push for peace in Ukraine.
Resistance on the battlefield. Putin is looking for other ways to break the Ukrainian spirit. Recently, I received yet another alarming report from our intelligence. Now, Putin does seem to be planning attacks on our nuclear power plants and their infrastructure, aiming to disconnect the plants from the power grid. With the help of satellites, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, satellites of other countries. Russia is getting images and detailed information about the infrastructure of our nuclear power plants. But what does this really threaten? Any missile or drone strike,
Are you against Ukraine because they're pro-Israel? I'm not against Ukraine. What? I think it's stupid if Ukraine is pro-Israel, especially considering that Israel has also played a formative role in Ukraine's demise, both in the beginning as a third party that refused to give Ukraine the Iron Dome because they were worried that it would get into the hands of Russia, which would then get into the hands of Iran and Hamas. That's what Israel's reasoning was for not giving Ukraine an Iron Dome, which is crazy because it's like an American-funded defense project, and Israel got to decide where it goes. Sure, it was like a joint effort, but come on now. Ukraine is 100% pro-Israel. How do you not know this? I mean, are we talking about random Ukrainians or are we talking about the state? Because if it's the state, then yes, they are a fucking non-NATO nation. So they're just, yes, this is an American proxy, and therefore, of course, they're going to say that they're pro-Israel, even though they've also like voted against Israel every now and then. Yeah. Also, Russia is pro-Israel. Israel is the entry point for many Russian oligarchs to enter the international markets to keep their banking in Israel. You know, their nice dual citizenship. Russia literally trained the Hamas fighters before October 7th. Dog, I'm Turkish. This means nothing to me, okay? Yes, the Turkish government has also offered shelter to Hamas leadership. Do you think that the Turkish government is anti-fucking Israel? No, it's not. If you listen to what the Russians are doing, yes, they have a strategic partnership with Iran. The Russian government statements are pro-Palestine. So is the Chinese government statements, as a matter of fact. China still happens to be the second largest trading partner of Israel in the same fucking time frame that they've written 800 fucking sternly worded letters. I think a lot of you guys fail to comprehend that big countries like this, regional powers like this, don't want to fuck up the bag. They don't give a shit. Okay? Technically, you're American, not Turkish. If you know what I mean. I am both American and Turkish. I have a dual citizenship. Okay? Yeah, but the Turkish government has to play the balancing game. They're a non-NATO nation, whereas Ukraine is a NATO non-NATO nation. They're a non-NATO NATO nation. No, Turkey is a NATO nation through and through. Turkey has American nukes. Turkey has American nukes in Incirlik, an American military base. Okay? Yes. Turkey is fighting U.S.-backed Kurdish militias. This is also correct. This goes further into the evidence category for my argument, which is don't listen to what these countries are saying. Don't even look at what these countries are doing every now and then. You have to understand the broader initiatives that these regional powers engage with. Okay? That's it. And at the end of the day, there is no like moral stance that any country is willing to take, with the exception of, I guess, the Ansar Allah movement in Yemen. And even then, you could make an argument that they had a lot of political reasons as to why they would militarily oppose Israel, no matter what kind of penalties they incur in the process, because it would basically put them at the throne in the aftermath of this like ongoing Yemen civil war backed by UAE and Saudi aligned forces. Now they have all of the power and all of the control. Even then, you can make that argument. Ultimately, no one fucking operates in a moral way. There's no real reason for nation states to operate in a moral fashion for moral reasons. How is that broader? What do you mean? Turkey wants to be the domineering superpower in this region. That's it. That's the reason why they want to wipe out Kurdish villages, so they can repopulate the Kurdish villages or have like Turkish control over those areas. Kurds, on the other hand, are used as a militia force by the American government to keep the Turkish government at bay or at check whenever they feel the need to do so. Outside of that, though, it's just Turkey is still very much going to always play nice with America and with Israel. I don't know, you mentioned the Ansar Allah movement when talking about looking at it as a broader thing. Yes, because Ansar Allah and Yemen is the only regional power that is bombing Israel. Is Turkey bombing Israel? No. Turkey has a fuck ton more opportunity to completely shut off the Israeli energy grid, for example. Is Turkey doing that? No. Turkey has also consistently continued trade with the Israeli nation, in spite of the fake BDS boycotts that Turkey claimed it was putting on Israel. That's why I'm saying, out of all of the countries in this region, the one that actually stands out and has defended the Palestinians, and even then you can make an argument that it wasn't like for moral reasons, but still, regardless, it has been Yemen. That's it. I don't know how you managed to bring Yemen into this. I don't know how else I can fucking spell it for you. When we were talking about NATO, yes. Look at Syria. Assad sucked dick. Having said that, even with the limited control Assad had and his violent ways, clearly it was a threat to Israel's ambitions in the region. Turkey played a formative role in taking out Assad. You're an Assadist, bro, lol. Come on, man. You've been in here for so long. Come on. He was replying to the other guy, I guess. Oh, man. Fun fact, my cousin has been to Assad's clinic in Moscow. That's crazy. It's crazy that he's just like straight up. Is he an eye doctor in Moscow now? Hasanabi works for both Mossad and Hamas. Classic double agent. Ophthalmologist. Hasanabi, the only ones who get to be nuanced and complicated and mostly evil are the good guys. Come on. Shit leader, but hey, great ophthalmologist. All right. Anyway, I'm done. I'm done for the day. I'm tired, man. I just got hit with a wave. All right, listen.